Today is April 4th, and we just got finished watching conference, the last session of conference. And this evening we're going to be making a little tape with Mom and Dad, and tonight we're going to talk some about Dad in high school and college a little bit. Dad, where did you go to high school?
I went to high school in Madison High School in Rexburg. And I went to grade school there too. And we had our 7th and 8th grade was just next door to the high school. And I played basketball when I was in the 8th grade. For an 8th grade, we had an 8th grade basketball team. And we used to go out to various grade schools around the community, like out to Hibbard and up to Sugar City and some other places.
Did you win?
Played 8th graders.
When you were in 8th grade, huh?
Some of them, I guess. I don't remember. I think we won enough of them that I felt comfortable. Good. And when I was in high school, I hadn't done any dancing really, but they started having school dances, and there were a couple of girls that we were talking with one day. Jay and I and a couple of my other friends were just visiting with him about dancing, and they said, "Why don't you go over and dance?" We said, "We don't know how." And I said, "Well, we'll teach you." So we went over, and they taught us how to dance. And, it was kind of fun. We got a little bit acquainted with it that way, and then we started going more and more. And
What kind of dancing did you do?
well, they were just
Ballroom.
they were just ballroom dancing, really, in those days, wasn't it? It wasn't anything else.
Waltzes and
We did
foxtrots?
foxtrots and waltzes and that sort of thing. It wasn't. They didn't started doing jitterbugging until after we were out of high school. And then in the freshman year, I didn't play basketball in high school. Didn't play football in high school either that year. And can't remember too much. I was quite interested in doing athletics. I was quite interested in doing plays and operas and things like that. And I took a class of extemporaneous speaking with Miss Peterson, Lawrence Peterson. She was from Preston. I'd come up there and was teaching. She was an excellent teacher. I just liked her very much. And I learned some what do you call them, honey, when you take both parts?
Debating.
Hmm?
Debating?
No, it wasn't debating. It was just giving a reading. I took reading and learned some readings where you'd talk about, one person would talk and then you'd turn the other way and then speak as if it was another person, then you'd speak back as if it was another person. And I did 2 or 3 of those and kind of enjoyed those very much. One of them was called China Blue Eyes. It was about a girl that had, they called China Blue Eyes in those days. And I don't remember too much now, except that she was wanting to get the attention of a boy, and he wasn't particularly interested. But eventually, she did get his attention, and the last comment was that the China Blue Eyes had done their work.
This was one of the readings?
It was one of the readings. And I always went out for the plays and the operas and stuff like that, but I never did try for a major part until I was a junior. But I sang in the choruses and had some minor parts and things like that. And I enjoyed it very much, besides practicing basketball and practicing football. And we played softball quite a bit too. So it was quite an active
What
time.
did you do after schools? I mean, what would you do in your leisure time?
In our leisure time, I used to just, we had a basketball court out behind a couple of houses. We'd put up a telephone pole kind of thing and
Mom, what were you going to say?
put a basketball net on it, and we'd play basketball. And I used to play basketball in behind our house on the entrance where the car would go down in. There was a little flat spot there. I didn't have a basketball, but I put up a gallon can and used a little rubber ball about 4 or 5 inches across, and I would practice dribbling, and it was low enough that I could reach up and slam dunk it, you know, and yet I'd try to shoot it, and then I'd grab it and slam dunk it and play around. It was mostly just dribbling and learning to pivot and dribble and pivot and dribble.
That's interesting. Now, every kid has a basketball standard and a nice place to practice and all. And the best ball.
We had a dirt field out there, a dirt area that we kind of leveled off under the basketball, under the net, the basket. And we neighbors would get together, and a couple of the college men would come over and play with us. Seth Parkinson and Bert Conley Watts, and I remember, and Mon Watts and Joe Parkinson and Berkeley Parkinson and I, and Arlen Christensen and Jay Kerr. We had quite a few around there that wanted to play basketball. And so we kind of learned from Seth Parkinson and Conley Watts, who were really the stars at Rick's College, and went on to be famous in college ball down at Utah State. And because they were our neighbors, they would play with us.
Did you have jobs at church?
Didn't have any jobs in the church. I was I was Deacon's Quorum president and Teachers Quorum president. I remember going over and having to fix the sacrament when I was the Deacon's Quorum president. We had to fix the sacrament and everything else, and be prepared, get it all set up. We had our meetings at the college when I was a deacon because we didn't have a local ward chapel. We used the auditorium at the college for our Sunday meetings. And then eventually we started building the chapel, and I used to go down and work. In those days we could donate time as to help supply our commitment for a certain amount of money, and they'd allow us so much an hour to work, and I'd go down, and it was kind of a do odd jobs, carry things for the carpenters and that sort of thing. That was kind of fun. I enjoyed doing that. And then Bishop Taylor was my bishop. And he was a bishop for a long time because he was bishop even after I'd gotten married and was up in Seattle as an intern and came home. He was still my bishop. So I remember coming from Seattle down there on our way to the Army. And I had been working overtime on off hours up in Seattle for some of the local doctors who wanted me to help them by going out and making house calls for them and save them the time. And if they'd get a call, and if it was something that they thought was simple enough that I could take care of as an intern, like a sore throat or cough or something like that, they would let me go out and make the house call, and then I'd charge them for the house call. And usually it was $5 or $6 for the house call. I'd have to go sometimes clear across town and just all around. By the time I got through with my internship, I had made $800 doing house calls. And so when I got to came back to back to Rexburg, and paid the bishop my tithing, he couldn't believe that I would pay a tithing on that $800
Because it was so much.
because it was so much for someone who was just
So young.
young and going to school and just finishing internship, and was going on to go into the army, and just finished medical school, and gone into the internship,
Needed every penny.
and they needed every penny. Because the rationing was on at that time. Now, of course, we're getting beyond our high school times there. But in high school, it was like when I was a junior, I was in the opera, because I was in the chorus, and Dottie was a freshman then, and we were in the chorus together, and we enjoyed it very much. And then when I was a senior, I had the lead in the opera and the lead in the operetta.
Do you remember what it was?
The operetta was called The Drums of Weed, O-U-I-D-E, and it was quite an interesting opera. I had a lot of fun. Part of the time, I remember we sang. What was that? Indian Love Call. I sang the Indian Love Call, remember? And the opera in an opera.
Was that in?
That's when I was a junior.
Was that the one that she was told the name of? Was that the Indian one?
That one?
Was the one that you sang Indian Love Call in the title you just gave?
No, that was a different one. The Drums of Weed was a play about the Foreign Legion in India, and an English type of thing. But the operetta, I can't remember the name of the operetta.
Was it Jerry of Jericho Road? The one that you were in was Jerry of Jericho Road.
I can't remember that.
With Leo Ryder.
I don't remember that. And we had one in Idaho, in college, when I was a lead in college with Leola. But in high school, I don't know the name of the operetta, but I remember I had to stand off stage, and in order to get my voice to carry out so that they could hear it in the audience, I sang through a megaphone, and it gave such a resonance to my voice that the professor of music at Ricks College, who was sitting in the audience we all knew him, he knew us, and our families and everything. It was such a small town. And when we got through, my mother said that he had commented, he said, "My, he has such a full, rich voice, he really ought to go into singing as a profession." And I laughed at that.
No, you do have a beautiful voice, I think.
Absolutely.
Days have gone by for that, I think.
You don't want to go to professional singing now, huh? Well, what types of activities did the church have for the youth back then?
We always had ward plays, and I was in those. I was the lead in one of those with Wanda Ricks, I remember. We had to stand by a gate and sing a love song to each other. I can't remember what it was now. But I remember we didn't have any operas or any operettas or anything in church, but we had to give talks. We had to give...
Did you go on camping trips?
We didn't go on any camping trips. Well, we did too, in a way. We went Fathers and Sons outings. I remember when I was a young man, maybe not even up to high school, but we went on a Fathers and Sons outing up to what they called Table Rock, which was just west of the Grand Teton Peaks. And I remember climbing up there, and we went up. It was at the top was a great big rock, about 40, 50 yards wide and almost square on top, but it was really flat on top, and yet it was about 30 feet higher than the ground below. And the men climbed up there and got on top. leaders and so forth, and our fathers. And I remember we had a kind of an electrical storm go over while we were there, and they were wearing felt hats, old felt hats, you know. But it didn't rain or anything like that. But it did thunder and lightning, and we were down below. When they came back down, they took off their hats, and they said they could feel their hair tingling. And they took off their hats, and there were little tiny pinpoint burns through the felt hats where the electricity from the lightning had penetrated, and it caused those little pinpoint burns in their felt hats. That's how close I got scared when I saw that. I thought, man, we were getting close enough that we could have had an electrical flash and electrocuted or something up there, you know. But didn't happen, and we just took it as a great experience. But it's always made me a little cautious after that about being aware of how dangerous lightning could be. Because later on in my life, I had an uncle who was killed with lightning, and I had an uncle who was, and several boys were killed hauling pipes because of lightning.
Who was your uncle?
It was Uncle Joe Parkinson, who was Berkeley Parkinson's father. He was really my dad's uncle, because he was my grandmother Packer's brother, and she was a Parkinson. She was a.
Do you know the story behind his death?
Samuel Rose Parkinson was her father, and she had 8 sisters and 2 brothers.
Well, he was in his 80s, and he was out plowing the field, wasn't he?
When he was killed with lightning,
Mm-hmm.
he had sold his farm where we used to know it, and had moved down to Ryrie, and was plowing with a tractor in a storm.
And he was 80?
In his early 80s, and still farming. And
That's what we need to do, Dad, is just to get you a farm now.
yeah. And he was
A tractor, some horses.
He was killed on his tractor. It wasn't a rubber wheel tractor. It was a Caterpillar tractor. It was hit by lightning.
Killed it.
Killed. But and so I've been quite cautious about lightning storms. I always wanted to be in a fairly safe place. And so I've kind of counseled my children to be careful of lightning. When we had the farm and we were hauling pipe, you know, I said, if there ever gets a storm coming up, just put the pipe down and come to the house and get out of the field. Or if you just can't get out of the field, just lie down on the ground so that you won't stand up and be something that the lightning could come down to. But certainly get rid of those pipes, because they're up there 40 feet. And we had several kids, in my experience, who got killed with lightning.
You know, what I read the other day was that instead of lying down on the ground, you should squat down so that you only have a smaller area that touches the ground, and then just hunch over and hold the ball.
That's an idea, too.
Better than lying down on the ground.
Because the lightning can strike the ground and
Uh-huh.
travel through the ground, I suppose.
Well, I think what they say is the lightning comes to the ground up, but that isn't logical, is it?
Not necessarily, because of I don't know. Maybe the electrical impulse builds up in the clouds, and maybe it comes from the ground up. I don't know.
Anyway.
Doesn't matter.
Well, Dad, what do you remember about your dad during that time of your life, your family life during that time of high school?
Dad was the coach at Rick's College, and he and I had an arrangement. We had 2 cows and some chickens and a couple of pigs. We lived right in Rexburg, and we had to milk the cows morning and evening, and it had been my responsibility in my junior high and early high school years to milk the cow in the evening. He said he would do it in the morning so that I could sleep in. but I would do it at night. And then as I got up to be practicing basketball after school, then I said it was hard for me to get home and milk the cow. And so he said, well, if you'll milk the cow in the morning, I'll milk the cow in the evening. So we made that switch. And I got to where I was doing it in the morning. But as time went on that way, we moved from where we were into a house where we lived about a block and a half away from where our other home had been and where our cows were still shedded, barn, and I'd have to walk up in the middle of the wintertime, the blizzards and everything else, and the snow was sometimes 2 or 3 feet deep. And I'd have to carry the milk home from up there in a 5-gallon can. 5-gallon.
Bucket.
2 or 3 gallon
2 or
bucket.
3 gallon bucket. Yeah.
And I remember making steps in the snow, and I'd follow the steps so that I wouldn't be sinking clear down in every time. I'd have maybe 6 inches down into the steps when I'd step on trees. It's kind of an interesting life. And Dad was a good coach. I used to go up and watch him practice when I was a little kid. And in fact, I was the mascot when I was 4 years old. My mother made me a basketball suit. I can't remember if I told this in the last one or not, but the team would carry me up the steps from the basement where they dressed to the top floor where the gym was. They'd carry me up the back steps on their shoulders, and then they'd get up the top, then they would all, in those days, they ran out and ran around the court, the basketball court, and then they'd run across the midline and start to work out, you know. Well, then the little mascot, mother made a basketball suit for me that was the same colors and everything that its college had. And so I would go out in front of, and I'd be in front of the team, and I'd prance around in front of them around the court, and then when they came around, I'd come over and sit with mother.
I bet that was fun.
The first time I went up there, I cried and cried and cried and didn't want to go out. And the guys begged me to go out. Finally, they carried me out, and I was still crying, and they set me down on the floor, and they said, now you run. And so I started running. They followed me around, and after that,
The mascot cries because he
I was afraid.
I was only 4 years old. But I got used to it, and I kind of enjoyed it as time went on. But that was a wonderful gym because it had an arched ceiling, and you could throw the ball from down here. You could hardly reach the ceiling by throwing it up, basketball. But so you could have a lot of arch that you could put in your shots, so they go way high and come down through the basket. Whereas lots of the places where we used to play, they were little bits of gyms, and the ceiling was low, and if you tried to arch the ball, it'd hit the ceiling. So you had to shoot more straight, and you had to judge how you're going to get it into the basket if you were in the bank. It was a little bit difficult. We got a lot of fun. I used to go with them down to the gym at night when the team would dress. We always wanted to go up on Saturday and play, and it was really kind of against the rules to go up into the gym when we went in college.
How about that kind of against the rules?
The janitor used to watch for us on Saturdays, and if he'd see us up in the gym, he'd come up and kick us out. But when I would leave, when I'd go down where the fellows were dressing on the ground floor, and everybody'd leave, and I would inadvertently wander over to one of the windows and open the window, throw the latch on the window so it was open. And so on the next morning, when we wanted to play ball, we'd come and go through that window and get into the gym. And then we'd close it after we got in, and we'd go up the back steps and go up to the gym and play. And when Brother Ovard, who was the janitor, would come to do his work, he'd hear us playing up in the gym. And when we'd hear him coming up the steps on one side, we'd go down the other side and go out down the basement again and go out. And he'd come to the window and sometimes he'd shake his fist at us and tell us we shouldn't be doing that. On Sundays, he'd tell Dad that we were up in the gym playing ball and we weren't supposed to be. And I'd have to talk to Dad about that, but never did get after me much. We did learn how to play basketball. And on Sundays, off times after church was over, we would, in the summer times, we'd go over and play tennis on the school's tennis courts. A bunch of us kids, and we'd play where two fellows would play in the winter to keep the court. And as long as he could win, he could stay on. And when he got lost, well, then someone else came on to his place. But the winner kept the court. That's how I learned to play tennis. And I played basketball. I played football when I was a junior in college, in high school. And I played also when I was a junior, played basketball when I was a junior. But I didn't play on the main team. When I was a senior, then I played on the main team, both in football and basketball and tennis. And,
Well, Dad, to change a little bit, thinking of home a little bit, what kind of foods did you eat and what were your favorites? What did your mom like to fix to you?
Mother
for
was an excellent cook.
different times of the
Grandma
year?
was an excellent cook, and we had, during the Depression, which was 1929 to 1933, thereabouts, 34, we had our own garden, we had our own milk, we had our own eggs, we had our own pig and chickens, and so, but we didn't have a lot of food to raise. We didn't raise a lot of food, but everyone was poor. I remember Dad made $1,900 a year coaching, and that was spread out through all 12 months. And so we didn't have very much money, and Christmases were rather scarce. But you know, everybody was in the same boat. I didn't realize that some of the kids that were in school with me in 1929 and 30 were not with me in 1931 and 32. They had moved, but I didn't really know why they'd moved. And the reason they moved was because they didn't have any job and they had to go looking for work. Their parents did, so the kids went, of course, with them. But we ate what I thought were very good meals all the time. But
Here's
sometimes,
what your favorite food was, or what some of your favorites.
What things did you eat?
we had potatoes and gravy, and I really liked potatoes and gravy, and vegetables and things like that. Milk, we drank a lot of milk. Grandpa always had milk toast or bread milk before we'd go to bed at night. And he and I'd sit and break up the bread into a big glass of milk.
Just the two of you?
Just the two of us, and sit and eat bread and milk. And
We've done that before.
it was a lot of fun. When I used to come home from school, Mother had the milk in pans in the refrigerator, and they were about 10, 12 inches across, something like that. And then the cream would rise, and I'd come home and I'd take a piece of Mother always made bread. It was homemade bread, and a nice big thick of homemade bread, thick slice, and I would just take, without putting any butter on it or anything, I'd just take the hot pancake turner, and I'd mark out in that cream the size of the slice of bread, and then I'd get underneath the edge of the cream and lift it up on that hot cake turner and just turn it over on my toast, on my bread. It wasn't toasted, just on my bread. It was always an eighth of an inch thick.
The cream.
The cream was.
And it was
just
heavy enough that
straight cream. It just would lift right up, and because it had a little crust on the top of it.
You have never seen that, have you?
And we could just get under it and lift it right over, you see. And then I'd go home and I'd go get a spoon and put sugar on it till it was a quarter of an inch thick. And then I'd eat that as soon as I got home. Because I had gone since lunch. And we'd always came home to lunch we had to come, it was about a mile from school to home. We'd always walk home for lunch and then go back. We'd run home and run back, really. And, but then Mother saw me doing that a few times, and she said, Dean, if you do that, you won't eat any supper. That'll spoil your supper. And I said, Mom, when I don't eat any supper, let me know, and I'll stop doing it. Will that be okay? And she said, yeah, that's okay. So I never did get told not to eat it anymore, because I always ate my supper. In addition, I was a growing boy.
The cream, when you put whole milk, this is not pasteurized milk, see, when you put whole raw milk in a pan this deep and this big around, you'll get a thick cream about that thick. And it isn't on the top, on the underneath where the milk is, it's quite soft, but the top is quite firm. And you actually can lift it up with a pancake turner, a whole piece at a time like that, and tip it over on your bread.
Without spilling,
Without
dripping,
spilling it.
dripping or anything else. I just pick it up and lift it until it quit dripping underneath, and see. And then I
The
just,
milk dripped off.
yeah, the milk dripped off, and I just get it right up to the edge and just turn it over.
It was about the consistency of what? Pudding,
Put in
almost?
a little.
It was,
It had to have a
Thick
crust.
gravy, maybe,
It had to,
the crust on it.
it'd be real thick
it
pudding,
was thick, yes.
because
Oh.
it was kind of dried on the
Almost like
top,
it was
you know.
set.
Yes.
Only it wasn't set, it wasn't dry because cream is not dry, but it was,
Had a little tiny bit of a dry spot on top, just a little dry on
Yeah.
top, to help
Just from the
together.
air.
To help together, yeah,
Ah.
from evaporation. Because they didn't cover the pans.
Right.
it was wonderful on your bread with sugar on the top.
Oh, it was,
Mm.
just wonderful.
Well, what would you have for breakfast?
We always had cooked cereal for breakfast. Occasionally, there were cornflakes in those days. But that's only when I remember when I was young, was cornflakes. Kellogg's cornflakes. And it was, or Post Toasties.
That's what it was.
Post Toasties and Kellogg's cornflakes. We had both kinds part of the time. Most of the time when I was real young, it was Post Toasties. And Post was the name of the company, and they were Post Toasties. And I remember sending it to that. We had that up on the dry farm a lot. But at home, we generally had cooked cereal. It was germade, which is a kind of a thin, almost like Wheat Hearts now. And we had rolled oat, we had oatmeal, and
You had
germade.
bacon and eggs.
We had bacon and eggs and toast, things like that. And when it was really during the Depression, a lot of times for dessert, during dinner, we didn't, we always put up fruit too. But a lot of the times for dessert, Mother would just take a head of lettuce and split it into quarters and give her as many pieces as there were people around the table. And we'd put that in a cereal bowl and cover that with cream and sugar and eat that for our dessert. And I got to really liking that. Iceberg, it was kind of an iceberg lettuce, head of lettuce, not the loose lettuce, you know. And it was really, I enjoyed it. I just cut it with a knife and soak it with the sugar and the cream and eat it with a fork. And then we'd have the bread and milk at night.
Would you always eat all your meals together as a family?
And we had all our meals together. Lunch, too. Mother cooked everything. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Were Sundays different? Did you have a special meal on Sunday?
Well, I don't remember if they were anything special because we had real good meals all the time. I suppose maybe on Sunday we had something special, cake or something. It was kind of like that. We had good meals all the time. Even Thanksgiving
That's
wasn't.
a lot of wind and rain.
It was raining, it was storming out there. I saw the lightning coming from behind you, and I can hear the wind blowing
I
through
can
the
see
fire.
I can see the
Flashes?
lightning flashes.
I didn't see it. But it was, my life was very enjoyable, even though we felt like we were poor. But we didn't hurt for food. Our clothes, I used to, we didn't send many of our clothes to the cleaners. occasionally we would. But most of the time Mother taught me to spot them. She taught me to press them, press my pants, to press my coat. She ironed the shirts all the time. She had a regular iron. And later on she got an electric mangle iron. But most of the time going to high school and so forth, she did it with a regular electric iron. When we were little kids, before we had electric irons, she used to heat the iron on the stove.
Do you remember that at all?
I remember heating the iron on the stove. And she had a thing that because that was up at the dry farm, a lot of times up there, we always didn't have it. But down home, we
didn't have electricity.
we didn't have electricity up there. But down home, we had electricity, but the electric irons, I remember those, but I do remember, maybe all I remember is the fact that she was telling me, she showed me pictures of her mother and iron.
Using the other kind of
using the
iron.
other kind of irons. I don't really remember seeing her iron with the other kind of irons, like going and getting one and taking the handle and putting it in, moving it over and doing it until it got too cold, and going and getting the other one while the other was on the stove getting hot. We did have wooden coal stoves up on the dry farm and at home. But after I got to be in the 6th or 7th grade, we always had an electric stove, and we had ice refrigerators. I remember the iceman used to come around and bring ice. And we'd always run out to him, Mr. Evans. He was deaf. He'd had measles and had gone when he was a child and then lost his hearing. And so he spoke like someone who was deaf. And we would go and he'd cut off little pieces of ice for us to eat. And we really loved to have him come.
Now, tell me about that. You put the big block of ice in the refrigerator.
We put the big block of ice in. He'd come in and put the big block of ice in the refrigerator.
It wasn't called a refrigerator, it was called an icebox.
And up on the dry farm, Mother had made a cupboard-like thing, and she hung an old wool blanket over the front of it. We put it down in a cellar that we dug into the ground, put that ice box down there. It wasn't really an ice box, but we'd put this. She'd soak it in water and put that over that, and then several times during the day, she'd go down with water and re-wet that blanket. And as it evaporated, it cooled off the food that was in the refrigerator cupboard there. And that's where we took care of our cold. Kept some of our food during the summertime. We had cow in the summertime up on the farm. So
would it cool off enough at night that
we wouldn't
even during the summer, the cellar would cool off enough that you wouldn't have to refrigerate?
During the night, we didn't do that. We just wet it before we went to bed, I guess. And then we had
it would have been real cool at night anyway up there.
Yeah, it was cool. We had a little ravine about a half a block from our place, and the snow would blow that ravine full of snow in the wintertime. It was 15, 20 feet deep. And in the first thing in the spring when we'd go up, the rest of the snow would be melted pretty well. And as soon as it was melting off, we'd go up, and that would still be covered with snow. And so Dad would bring a load of straw, and we'd just throw it out on top of that snow. And that'd hold it there all summer long. It wouldn't melt. And it wouldn't melt away. And we would go down there during the summer and move the straw away and get 2 or 3 buckets full of the snow and bring it up to Mother. And Mother would make frozen puddings or kind of a frozen dessert using that to freeze it with.
Well, didn't you have an ice cream freezer too?
Well, we did have an ice cream freezer later on. We had an ice cream freezer, and we'd take it down to the snowbank bank and freeze it down there. Sometimes when Mother would get through making this frozen dessert, we would take it down, and we'd cover it up, of course, and take it down and bury it in the snow to keep it frozen so we could carry it from one day to the next. But we would go down with the ice cream freezer and we'd fill it up with this frozen snow, and we just have to keep packing it and packing it and packing it while we turned the handle for the ice cream. We'd have that in the summertime occasionally. It's really lightning out there now.
It is, it's really going to town.
I see it flashing in the light in the windows.
Yeah, I can see the same one. It's really, it's stormy.
Here's the thunder. It's the first time we've had a real thunderstorm here, isn't it?
This summer.
This spring.
This spring, yeah.
But I had some really nice times. Dottie and I used to date a lot. We didn't date steady all the time, as much as I wanted to. But we'd go to dances, and I learned to dance quite well. One of the girls was a dance teacher who was in our class as a senior, and one time they asked her to dance for the intermission. And so she asked me if I would dance with her as a partner during the intermission of our Friday night dances that we had up at the Playmore, which was up above J.C. Penney. You remember?
Where we had Friday night dances all
Where
the
we had
time.
Friday night dances all the time. And we had an orchestra that would come. It was really quite, and we dressed up to go to those dances. They were quite nice.
Oh, yeah, you didn't go in jeans.
You didn't go in jeans. You went in your
Or
Sunday
even
clothes.
You had a long dress lots of times.
Yeah. Of course, we had special dances like
Valentine's Day.
the junior ball and things like that we'd hold up there too. And when they had the director, Dottie had a beautiful ballroom dress that she wore for that.
I'm going to pause right here and change batteries, okay?
Let me tell you a little bit about what I did a couple of summers. When I was about a freshman in high school, I told Dad that I was tired of working on the drive home all summer. And because we didn't have a tractor, and I'd have to drive the horses. And I got so dirty and so tired, and so lonesome from being up there all the time. I told him that I wanted to work downtown. So he made arrangements with me to work at one of the grocery stores. And I went down and worked at the grocery store one summer. And I quite enjoyed that. Mother stayed down that summer, and
What did you do at the grocery store?
I just worked as a stock boy and carried groceries out for the ladies and stocked the shelves and things like that, and sacked up candy we had what they called glassine bags. They were the first development of plastic bags, and it was called glassine. I guess, I don't know why, but they were little bags made of kind of heavy, poor plastic looking stuff. I'm thinking of plastic now. And we'd just put in so much of that and then tie them and wrap them with a string. And that was my job to do that. But after that summer, I went back to the farm and felt a little happier because it got kind of boring down there too. But when I got to be a junior, the year after I was a junior, I met Mother while I was a junior. And the year after I was a junior at school, that next summer, I told Dad I didn't want to work on the farm. I said, I want to work downtown. But there wasn't a job in town for me to work, so he made arrangements for me to work for Mr. Priest, who was my sister's boyfriend's father. He had an irrigated farm out at Hibbert, which was about 4 or 5 miles out of town. And so I would sleep out there some of the time and come in for the weekend. And sometimes I'd sleep out there. But
When you would come in, where would you stay?
I'd come into our house.
And Mom was home?
Mom was home. Not Dottie, but my
Right.
mother was home that summer.
And so Grandpa went up to the dry
Yeah.
farm and spent the whole summer there
Grandpa was
alone?
up, well, there was a hired man and his wife living up there to do the cooking. But Grandpa and Merrill and Claire and so forth would go up there when they needed them.
And
Your
they,
mother went sometimes.
Mother would go occasionally too.
but they were apart for a while this summer, every summer.
For during that year, when I was when I was a junior. And, but I remember when out now talking about what did we eat, out at Priest's, she fixed breakfasts that were just out of this world. There was a great big bowl of cooked cereal, and then they would serve cream to put on it. Instead of milk, it would be cream. And then when they get through with the cereal, they would serve a steak and mashed potatoes and gravy and vegetables as part of breakfast. And if it wasn't that, it was eggs and bacon and toast, and we really ate till I was almost more than I could eat for the breakfast. And for lunch it was the same thing, and for dinner it was the same thing. Big meals. And my golly, I put on weight that summer.
I bet you got to be big that
I
summer.
was working like a trooper, and I got more muscles than I had before because I was really working hard and eating well. And then the next winter,
But he never did get fat.
I never-
So his stomach was.
We're working too hard, burning too many calories.
yeah, the next summer, I didn't work out there anymore. I went back up on the dry farm. And that was the summer I was a senior. The following year, I was a senior, and my responsibility then was to take care of the dry farm equipment. And so we had gotten a tractor then, a wheel tractor, so I had to take care of that and take care of the harvester and the harvester engine, and I had to haul the wheat. We had an old Ford truck and it was a flatbed, and I had to haul the wheat, and the wheat sacks were 120 pounds, and I got to where I could just pick one right up off the ground and put it up here on my shoulders like this and throw it up 3 high on that truck. And I'd do that. I'd make 3 loads a day. I'd load it up till it was 3 high, and then I would throw up some extra ones to tie in the tops. So I'd get up on top then and tie in the tops. Then when I got that completed, then I'd drive it down to Newdale and empty it, and then come back up and get another load, and do it again, and come back and get another load. And I did that by myself. So when I got through that summer, I had some muscles, and I was really. And so that summer, then I went in as a senior in college, in high school that year, and I felt I was the main man on the football team, the basketball team, and so forth. But I also had a girl that I was seeing then too, because Dottie had come to live in Rexburg. We had sold them our home, and for the winter of when I was a junior, I was living in that home, and and she came at Christmas time, didn't she? She came at Christmas time because she'd been living with her aunt in Ogden, and so they lived in our house. They lived in the bottom part of our house, and we had lived in the bottom part and rented the top part years gone by. So we lived in the top part when they were there, and they lived in the bottom. And for that winter, and that's when I got acquainted with Dottie. Really, it was during that winter. And I invited her to go to the play parties with me, and we went dancing and so forth on Friday nights. And then when I was, and then next year I was up at Rick's, and she was still at high school.
So were you two an item your senior year in high school? Your senior year in high school?
My senior year in high school, why we were dating pretty steady, weren't we?
We were.
We'd walk to and from school together. I'd carry her books. And then the winter time, while we'd walk with my big sheepskin coat around us, both of us. keep us warm. And later, that senior year, we had moved from that house, and we were living down where Conley Watts had lived, where Wattses had lived, and they'd moved to Logan. And so Dad bought their house. And it was right next to a house that we had built when I was 2 and 3 years old. And then we had moved from that house up onto to a place up on the hill, and then we bought Uncle Merrill, Vincent Merrill's father's home, where we lived, and then when Dottie's folks bought that home, we bought this home down below, next door to the one where we lived when I was 3 or 4 years old. It was only a block away. And then when we sold that house, then we moved up to a white house farther up the hill, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Did you build that house? No.
No, we didn't build that house.
Okay.
That house up there was already built, and we bought it, and that's where we had the cows behind. And then later on, because we just lived part-time there, because you were there when I lived in all 3 of those houses, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
We lived in that house, and we lived in the white house, then we lived in the yellow house down across from Solberg's.
Mm-hmm. But just for a short
Just
time.
short times in those different periods. And then we built the house that Mother and Dad lived in for a long time, and I didn't ever live in that home.
They built that after we were
I
married.
built that just after we were married.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some interesting times there. We used to go on
How's your
parties
time
out to
coming?
the Sand Hills with her. We'd go out to the Sand Hills together on school class parties and things like that. We took a class party out to the Buttes and walked up in the Buttes.
I'm just wondering if your tape's getting too long.
I've got 2 minutes.
We would. You want to talk now more about me? Do you have any questions?
No, I think that's enough for tonight.
Okay. You can talk about Mother if you'd like.
We'll talk about Mom on the next tape. Okay?
Mm-hmm.